How do you spot the ones who see possibility where others see constraint? Is it a question of talent or of leadership? Hi, I'm Mirza Chuktai, and this is part 8 of the Long Arc series, Talent That Transforms. In this episode, we'll step into a question that defines every transformation. How do you create systems where excellence is visible, where talent compounds, and where transformation does not consume people but renews them? Because there are systems where the success criteria for each role is crystal clear, where effort ties directly to individual outcomes, and those outcomes connect visibly to the team's success. In such a system, accountability is fair, merit has a place, and excellence can rise without distortion. And then there are systems where roles are defined by tasks, not by outcomes, where the measure becomes the list of what you do rather than the impact of what you deliver. These systems are rarely built with intent, but over time, they blur contribution and make transformation harder to sustain. And then there are systems that appear to mirror clarity, where dashboards and metrics tell a very clean story. But if contribution is obscured, if effort and outcomes are not attributed with integrity, then what looks like clarity is only optics. And optics may buy time, but in the end, they consume trust faster than they create it. The value of the first kind of system is that the system itself protects and promotes excellence. Alignment to mission, vision, and culture paired with transparency. A cause-driven, company-focused foundation. The value of the second kind of system is that excellence survives only at the mercy of leadership character. Without alignment, without transparency, everything depends on who is leading and whether they choose to protect and promote excellence or not. And the third, it offers no enduring foundation because optics cannot substitute for truth. And without truth, transformation cannot take root. Furthermore, when markets shift, when reductions become unavoidable, the difference between these systems becomes stark. In the first, the lower bell curve is visible across the enterprise. Contribution is transparent, and decisions, however difficult, are grounded in clarity. In the second, leaders face a moral dilemma. Do you let the leader go and risk losing the only lens you have into the team? Or do you let individual contributors go without certainty that favoritism is not at play or that the right decisions are being made? And in the third, the danger is even greater because when numbers mask reality, trust erodes at the very moment it is needed most. So the question of the day is, which system do you think is easier to drive transformation through? This is the crucible where talent either transforms or withers. Not in abstractions, but in the everyday systems that either make excellence visible or obscure it. And it is here that three realities about talent matter most. Discipline 1. Talent that reframes the possible. The spark of transformation. Individuals whose skill and vision show what good looks like, where others only see constraint. Discipline 2. Multipliers of momentum. The scaling force. Talent that compounds value across teams and horizons through skill, strategy, coachability, and timing. And discipline 3. The stewardship of talent. The sustaining ethic. Leadership's responsibility to renew, equip, and elevate all contributors so transformation endures. And to take this from theory into practice, these disciplines must be seen in motion as operating standards and proven in the crucible of change. First, from the few to the many to all. It begins with the few who see possibility within constraint, the sparks who show what good looks like in action. It scales through the many who multiply that spark into systemic momentum, and it endures when stewardship ensures all are included, valued, and sustained. Second, from action to system to responsibility. It begins in action, in skill that reframes what is possible. It grows through systems, momentum that compounds across boundaries, and it endures in responsibility. Leaders who renew the ecosystem of talent rather than consume it. And third, from transactional to transformational. It begins with individual excellence as the spark. It scales through the multiplication of excellence across boundaries. And it endures in stewardship, ethical, systemic leadership that moves beyond performance management into human accountability. This is the arc of talent that transforms. Systemic, scalable, enduring. And with that foundation, let us step into each discipline to see how transformations that last are built. Let's explore discipline 1, talent that reframes the possible. Transformation begins with those who see possibility where others see constraints. But vision alone is not enough. What makes them transformative is their skill, the ability to execute at a standard that makes them dependable, collaborative, and trustworthy. Every transformation begins with a few individuals who can show in action the art of the possible. Until someone shows what good looks like, transformation has no frame of reference. These sparks are not posturing for visibility. They move fast because something important needs to change. And through their skill, they show others what is achievable. The role of leadership is to recognize the need for this spark, to plant it, protect it, nurture it, and then multiply it. Because what happens next depends entirely on the system you create. In some organizations, skill and ability are constrained. The standard is kept low not to protect customers or partners, but to maintain a sense of stability. And that stability comes at the cost of progress over time. In others, skill and ability are celebrated. The standard is raised continuously in customer service, in partner management, in employee care, in community building. A system where all are welcome, but all are energized to raise their own standard of execution, player coach mindset from the front line to the C-suite. And by doing so, they raise the standard for the team and the organization. I've seen this truth in motion, not as theory, but in the lives of account teams and in the hands of leaders willing to bet on change. I had the privilege of helping an organization transform their flagship C-level advisory services, guiding C-suite and their senior leadership teams through business, engineering, and operations change. The mandate was bold: shift the sales organization from a transactional mindset to a transformational one, and prove the model with a fixed cost. Until we had created some critical mass for wider investment. I was introduced as the spark in an overlay capacity to work alongside qualified account teams and help capture opportunities ripe for digital transformation. My role was not to take over the accounts, but to show in action the art of the possible. We focused on 6 moves that define what good would look like at the end. Move 1. Elevate every engagement. Shift from transactional to transformational by stepping into the room as trusted advisors to the C-suite. Move 2. Lead discovery with discipline. A consultative mindset, a systemic approach to research, not guesswork, but rigor. Move 3. Tailor insights to strategy. Anchor discovery to our go-to-market, no more than 4 focus areas, each with a clear stakeholder map. Move 4. Take control of the deal flow. Add constructive tension. Challenge the sale. Deliver new perspectives to the CIOs and CTOs, and in the process, widen naturally across the customer organization. Move 5. Turn strategy into action. Lead account planning sessions, convert ambition into measurable outcomes, total cost of ownership, return on investment, real results for the customer and the enterprise itself. And lastly, move 6. Create true differentiators. Capabilities that were unique, valuable, proven to outperform competitors. These 6 moves were not theory. They were spark in motion. As a player and doer, I worked side by side with account teams in their field of play. This was not training in a classroom, it was a spark in motion, helping them deliver results while exposing them to a repeatable methodology they could use. For sparks to ignite, it was not enough to show process. We had to show possibility they could feel in motion. In sales, relationships open the door, but once the door is open, substance, clarity, and practitioner depth must walk through. That was the spark we embedded. Over time, this approach upskilled 10 global account teams across North America, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. And it proved a thesis that planting a spark inside the system compounds results until the methodology itself becomes part of the culture. This is the power of talent that reframes the possible. It does not just imagine change, it proves it again and again, until even the system itself has no choice but to catch up. That is the power of a spark. It not only changes the work, it changes the system itself. Now let's explore discipline 2, multipliers of momentum. Multipliers are the bridge between the spark of possibility and the system of transformation. Momentum compounds when talent multiplies, not by scale of effort, but by reach of influence. Transformation scales because of multipliers, talent that extends its impact beyond the boundaries of role or function. So, what makes someone a multiplier? It is never a single trait. It is the composite of 4 forces. Skill, the baseline of executional excellence. Strategy, the discernment to align work with enterprise direction. Coachability, the humility to learn, adapt, and pass knowledge forward. And finally, luck, the serendipity of timing and opportunity, which we cannot manufacture but can prepare for. When these 4 forces align, something remarkable happens. Multipliers create value that endures. Their contribution is not confined to a project or a quarter. It travels across teams, across ventures, and across horizons. They extend impact in ways that outlast roles and cycles. Their presence compounds, not because of title or visibility, but because the systems they touch are permanently elevated by their contribution. This is the quiet dividend of transformation. Talent whose value is measured not in transactions, but in trajectories. Catalysts can ignite momentum, but multipliers ensure it spreads. They are the ones who convert individual excellence into collective motion until transformation becomes more than the sum of the parts. Momentum compounds when talent multiplies, joining skill with strategy, humility with timing, until transformation becomes unstoppable. But principles only matter if they hold up in the field. And this is where the spark from discipline 1 had to evolve. The same example, now from a different vantage point, because the spark can ignite, but it only scales when multipliers take hold. So, let's continue. The spark was provided by the organization, and I was ready to engage. But we needed early wins to gain the confidence of the entire sales organization. The mandate was bold. Take the very best and make them even better. The challenge was obvious. If a team is already among the top performers, why risk challenging anything? Why become the experiment? The answer was evidence. If we introduce a spark into an account, 1 year later, the results had to be measurable. These were not small accounts. Each was already generating 5 million or more. So I asked management for 90 days. Time to assess personalities, depth of customer relationships, appetite for change, and share of wallet potential. At the end, I would identify 4 out of 10 accounts worth this concentrated effort. Not the easiest, but the ones with the most potential multipliers. Two accounts surfaced quickly. They had the skill. They were coachable as thought partners, and they were willing to extend their existing strategy. And it also appeared that timing was on our side. A budget cycle where we could aim for new business without losing ground on the existing book. The other two accounts were not there yet. Skill was not the issue, but strategy and coachability were. They were risk averse to the point of paralysis. So we made a choice. Prove the methodology with the first two, bring the others along once there was evidence in motion. The risk was real. If it failed, the spark would fizzle. But if it worked, the system would have no choice but to change. And it did. It worked. The early results created credibility, and credibility opened the door for the second pair of accounts. That became the blueprint. Success did not stay isolated, it traveled. One account grew 150% in the first year, from 5 million to over 12. 4 years later, it became the top account in the enterprise, scaling past 40 million, with dedicated teams in North America, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. Another account went from 0 to 15 million in just 2 years. The resistance to the overlay function disappeared in the organization. What began as hesitation turned into accelerated demand. And over time, the hiring standard itself changed. No longer, I'll deliver the results, don't worry about the how, but I'm multiplier ready, skilled, strategic, coachable, able to scale impact beyond my role. That was the quiet turning point. What began with 2 accounts spread to 10 and then 56. And what started with a few sparks created a system where multipliers became the expectation, not the exception. That is the essence of multipliers. Their contribution compounds until the system itself is permanently elevated. Because in the end, multipliers do not just scale outcomes. They scale belief. And belief is what carries transformation from possibility to permanence. And here's the last discipline. Discipline 3, the stewardship of talent. The measure of leadership is not how talent is consumed. It is how talent is sustained. Stewardship is what turns contribution into continuity, and continuity into culture. The majority of any organization is made up of individual contributors. They are the foundation on which every strategy, every system, and every service rests. Their names may not appear on strategy decks, but their hands and their minds carry every execution forward. And just because there is a choice for many does not mean the ones you already have should be treated any lesser. Their financial levers may be limited. A fixed salary, a narrow raise window, the constraints of role and structure. So how do you inspire people to give their best when money is not the lever? You make them feel valued. You equip them with tools that help them win. You design systems that amplify their skill instead of containing it. You clear away the silos, the politics, the turf wars that drain their energy. Stewardship is not benevolence. It is responsibility. Responsibility to care for the very people who carry the enterprise forward. This is stewardship, not the extraction of effort, but the renewal of human potential. It is the quiet recognition that people are not a cost line. They are the very continuity of the enterprise. Stewardship means creating organizations where contribution is visible, where excellence is renewable, and where every individual, from frontline to C-suite, can see themselves in the company mission. Because just as a strategy falters without clarity and culture fractures without trust, transformation collapses without the people who carry it forward day after day. This is how transformation endures. From the spark of a few to the multiplication of the many to the stewardship that sustains all. Transformation endures when leaders steward talent, renewing it, sustaining it, and elevating it as the foundation on which the future is built. And the real test of stewardship is not in times of plenty. It is in the crucible of crisis. I've lived through 3 downturns that tested stewardship in very different ways. The first time I saw stewardship tested was in the shadow of 9/11. It was a double blow. The dot-com bubble had already burst. Layoffs everywhere, talent flooding the market. And then came 9/11. A shock not just to markets, but to human existence. The dot-com I worked for was being acquired by a Midwestern bank. I flew in to Milwaukee on September 10th to support the technology transition. My return flight was set for the 12th. But when the airports shut down and planes were grounded, I had to stay. A week in a city I did not know. And in that week, I experienced something that changed my definition of stewardship forever. My manager, my director, my vice president, each of them personally took turns inviting me into their homes for dinner. They gave me their personal cell phone numbers, copies of their ID cards. So if I was questioned by authorities, I could have someone confirm my identity. They recognized the fear, the hostility, the uncertainty of the moment, and they acted not out of policy, but out of care. That week left a permanent mark on me. When the acquisition closed, I had a choice: stay in Atlanta where higher paying opportunities were waiting, or relocate to Milwaukee. I chose Milwaukee because, in the face of fear and anger, I had seen stewardship in action. And once you experience that, it becomes your reference, your frame of reference for what good looks like. The second time I saw stewardship tested was in the financial crisis of 2008. I had just moved from Raleigh to Long Island, taking on a new leadership role. And within 90 days, September hit, and the financial system went into freefall. Unemployment surged. Every 3 out of 5 households were touched by a job action. What I saw was leadership under duress. The executive team chose transparency, opening the books to show how much OPEX had to come out to remain competitive. The rest of the leadership fought to preserve every single headcount. Employees themselves offered furlough rotations, 1 week a quarter, to share the burden and preserve jobs. We still had to make tough decisions, but those decisions were made with fairness and discipline. Not tenure, not last in, first out, not favoritism, but contribution, impact, teamwork. Whether someone was helping to run the shop or to change the shop. It did not erase the pain, but it created trust. Trust that endured because people could see the integrity of the process. That was stewardship in the crucible of finance. Fairness, discipline, dignity. And it was individual contributors who carried that execution forward, who made the transparency real in the day-to-day execution of our enterprise mission. And the third time I saw stewardship tested was in the pandemic-infused global downturn. We went from 2 accounts to 10 and then to 56 and beyond. But for that success to sustain, every single function of the organization had to be firing on all cylinders across North America, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. And then came COVID. The board and C-suite made a bold declaration. Not a single person would be let go. They established clinics and hired medical staff dedicated to employees and their families with no copay. They absorbed rising healthcare costs without passing a single dollar onto employees. They introduced flex hours for parents with young children. They ensured IT, HR, and sales operations had zero disruption. They even eliminated sales elimination teams. They made it easy to work for the company in a world of complete disruption. Work seemed to work. And in that improbable moment, we worked harder than ever. Not because we had to, but because we cared for the people who cared for us at a time when it was most improbable. From North America to EMEA to Asia Pacific, the message was the same. From the very top, the commitment was clear. We cared for the people who cared for us. But it was employees across functions who carried that commitment forward, turning leadership's promises into livid reality. That is stewardship in action, not just sustaining business continuity, but sustaining human continuity. Because in the end, businesses do not endure on balance sheets alone. They endure because people do. And stewardship is what makes that endurance possible. At its heart, transformation is never carried by strategy alone. It is carried by talent, by people, by the few who reframe the possible, by the many who multiply momentum, and by the stewardship that ensures every contributor is seen, valued, and sustained. Strategy may set direction. Culture may provide energy. But it is people who carry it forward day after day. The heart of any organization, its most prized asset. But the question remains, do we treat it as such? Because in the end, the question is not whether talent can deliver today. The question is whether leaders can build systems where talent renews itself again and again. This is how transformation endures: systemic, scalable, and human. Because transformation that forgets its people will not last. But transformation that renews its people becomes legacy. The true test of leadership is not whether talent can deliver in the short term. It is whether leaders can build systems where talent compounds, where excellence is not consumed but continuously renewed. So let me leave you with these 3 questions. Who are the sparks in your enterprise? And are you protecting, nurturing, and multiplying them? Where are multipliers already at work? And what systems ensure their impact spreads across boundaries? And what does stewardship look like in your context? How are you ensuring every contributor feels valued, equipped, and sustained? Because in the end, transformation is not a program. It is people. And leaders are not judged by how quickly they consume talent, but by how faithfully they steward it. This is Mirza Chuktai, and next up is part 9, Financial Stewardship of Innovation, where we will bridge financial accountability with technology strategy and explore how accountability is not a constraint, but a competitive advantage. Until then, let's keep building people who build transformation that sticks.